What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to the reveal of the number 8 team in my 2021 NFL Power Rankings, as we are going to take a deep dive into the Cleveland Browns. Before we get started, a quick reminder to please do hit that like button down below. Really helps me out. Also, if you enjoy, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, as you're not going to want to miss a deep dive as we count down to the number 1 team in my rankings. And man alive, is it a good time in Cleveland, as the Browns really over the last 4 years or so have gone from laughingstock to playoff contender to now being in a small cluster of teams with legitimate Super Bowl aspirations. And you look at what I call the NFL trident and the 3 pillars of an NFL organization. It's been a few deep dives, about 15 since we brought this up, but coach, general manager, and quarterback being the 3 things that you really need in the NFL to sustain success from year to year and consistently edge out your competition. And the Cleveland Browns have really figured this thing out, man. You look at the quarterback, we'll talk about Baker Mayfield, but clearly the best quarterback they've had in a long time, and they seem to have found their guy, that jersey with the 19 quarterbacks over the last 2 decades. You know, that last name is going to stop at Mayfield for a long time here in Cleveland, it seems. You've got the coach in Kevin Stefanski coming in last year as a first-year head coach. Myself and many people really not sure what to expect there, and he shatters expectations and leads this team through a lot of adversity, implementing that Shanahan offense, and just seems to be a great leader of men as well, and a guy that is trending up towards potentially being one of the top head coaches in the NFL. Maybe a little premature to say that, but man, he was impressive and certainly was my pick for Coach of the Year last year. And then the front office, which to me might be the most impressive of these 3 legs of the organization, as Andrew Berry has made a strong case for being in the conversation for the best general manager in the NFL. And I don't say that lightly, but really the last 2 or 3 off seasons here, since he's taken over, have just been remarkable. Words can't even describe how impressed I've been with what he's been able to do building this roster, and every move he makes, they seem to stack good moves on top of each other. They find value, whether it's in the draft, trades, free agency, you name it. You could make a very strong case, and frankly, I'm going to make that case as we go through this entire roster in this video, that the Browns have the most loaded roster in the AFC. And when you pair that talent with a promising quarterback, with a head coach, that's when you get into the Super Bowl hype that I actually do think is warranted. So it's going to be a really exciting deep dive to go through all of these position groups, talk about where all of this talent is, whether it's known or under the radar talent, and talk about how these guys could step up here for this team as they go for that ultimate goal. And let's start with this team's offseason, their key departures and key additions. As I mentioned, Andrew Berry doing such a fantastic job building this roster. You're going to see some key departures here, but another thing that's just impressive about Andrew Berry is everything seems to make sense. They're going to suffer some losses on this team, but they literally replaced all of these losses, and in most of these situations were upgrades. So, you know, Sheldon Richardson, Larry Ogunjobi on the interior defensive line, solid players, and this I would say isn't guaranteed to be an upgrade, but you get Andrew Billings, a nice free agent add back from the opt-out last year, and they signed Malik Jackson. They made some other moves as well that just didn't quite make the list, but that interior defensive line group will be an interesting one that we'll get to later on in the video. But Olivier Vernon on his way out, for most spots, that's going to be a big loss. But they're able to bring in Jadeveon Clowney, who's just a better version of Olivier Vernon as a premium run-defending edge player and a good number 2 rusher next to Myles Garrett. Adrian Claiborne, who was their 3rd rusher last year, they lose him, but they bring in Takk McKinley, who, yes, was a first-round bust for the Falcons and has certainly been trending downwards, but as a 3rd edge piece, call that a push. Nice signing there on the cheap. B.J. Goodson was their starting Mike last year, and they bring in Anthony Walker. So kind of filling in that hole with the veteran there, but they also draft Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah to upgrade that linebacker position. And then Terrence Mitchell, good veteran starting corner for them, but the additions in the secondary no team improved their secondary more. Frankly, no team potentially improved a single position group more than the Browns improved their secondary, as they don't just draft Greg Newsome, but they get Greedy Williams and Grant Delpit back from injuries last season. They signed Troy Hill and John Johnson from the Rams. So massively overhauling this secondary, which was really the one last true weak link on this team. So a genuinely impressive offseason here for Andrew Berry. And now we are going to go position by position and talk about how these guys and the rest of this roster falls in line against the rest of the league. And that's going to start with the quarterback room here, where they're going to rank 13th. And this is a ranking that does hurt me a little bit. I've talked about how, I tried to ride the line, and even though I do believe Baker Mayfield shatters this ranking and gets into that top 10 quarterback conversation, there's no denying there's been some ups and downs throughout his career, and I can't give him full benefit of the doubt. But if I had to bet on it in a gun-to-my-head situation, does Baker Mayfield finish the year as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL? I would say yes. So I will throw that out there. I was super impressed by Baker Mayfield in the second half of last season. And you look at last year, and there's a lot of easy excuses to make for Baker Mayfield, whether you want to hear them or not. The COVID offseason, entering a year in a new system, getting familiar with the playbook, that alone was going to be difficult. Then they lose Odell Beckham about a third of the way through the season. They also endured a run of terrible weather, something I wouldn't normally put a lot of stock in, but you go 3 straight weeks where even a Deshaun Watson can't throw the football because the weather conditions were so poor for such a consistent amount of time there. That was also something that held Baker Mayfield back. But as he got more familiar with the playbook and the other receivers stepped up with Odell out and the weather got better, Baker Mayfield played like a top 10 quarterback last year, and they headed into the playoffs, and he was phenomenal down the stretch. And he's got the accuracy. He can read defenses and has a really underrated strong arm. That's how I missed on Baker Mayfield. I slept on his arm talent. So with those traits, he is going to have a very nice baseline. I think a worst case scenario here for Baker is going to be something like a Ryan Tannehill, like a Kirk Cousins, where in this offense, the same Shanahan system with great pass protection in front of him, he can play in structure, he can fire the ball with accuracy down the field, all the things we talked about with the play action boot game in this Shanahan offense, with the Seahawks deep dive last, and all of these other Shanahan offenses around the league. Worst case scenario, Baker's going to come in right down the middle. He's going to be right there with your Kirk and Tannehill. But to me, Baker has that next level playmaking ability. I keep using the term, when you need a bucket, when it's 3rd and 9, and that first read isn't going to be wide open for you, and you need to have that composure and balance and pocket presence in the pocket to know when and how to sense pressure and manipulate the pocket to extend plays, when it's appropriate to get on the move, when it's appropriate to hang in there. That also critical but subjective it factor. That to me is something that Baker really showed. You load up that Ravens game especially, but you saw it in the playoffs as well. But that Ravens game, what was it, week 15, week 16, was one of the best games of the season. You saw time and time again Baker doing things that you just don't see the Kirk Cousins and Ryan Tannehills do, making plays, improvising, and adding to the system, if you will. And that's where I get really excited about Baker Mayfield. He's got the athleticism and the arm talent to have that next level playmaking ability. So if he can find the right balance of playmaking and structure that you look for with the Rodgers and Watsons and Russells and Josh Allens of the world, because those are the guys that really elevate beyond the structure of the offense, then you're going to look at Baker Mayfield as a top 10 quarterback, because the stuff in structure is very solid and he's still young and still growing. So I do firmly believe in Baker. It's actually at a point where I'm now higher on Baker Mayfield, which is ironic given my pre-draft takes on him, I did miss on Baker Mayfield. I did not see the arm talent that he has shown in the NFL from his Oklahoma tape. But we are now here, and I am a firm believer in Baker Mayfield, and certainly a quarterback that can be good enough with an elite roster to win a Super Bowl. But I could see him actually being a guy that ascends that and being a quarterback that doesn't even need that elite roster to win a Super Bowl and get into that controversial elite conversation. But that is a ways down the road. But I think Baker's best football is certainly coming, and I cannot wait to watch him play this year. Case Keenum's a good backup behind him, but you're kind of capped. The Vikings team was pretty much perfect with Case Keenum, and they couldn't get the job done. That's pretty similar to the way I view it. They could be a playoff team with Case Keenum because the rest of this team is so good, but you're not looking at a Super Bowl with him. So 13th at quarterback, and to be completely honest, I expect Baker Mayfield to elevate and boost himself from that ranking. And then we've got the running back room where they're going to rank second. So I did give Derrick Henry the crown as the best runner for the offseason here, but really, if you want to put Henry, Chubb, or Dalvin Cook as the number one runner of the football in the NFL, I'm not going to really push back on it or debate it all that much. I think it's just a stylistic preference between those three. Chubb gets his contract now almost identical to the likes of Henry and Dalvin Cook. And, those three players to me add a unique factor to the running game, and that is, of course, the vision and the speed and the power and everything you look for in a good running back. But these guys' ability to hit those home runs in the running game, that's where they set themselves apart to me from pretty much every other runner. We'll see if, like Saquon has certainly potential to get into that group, but there's only a select few guys that I genuinely think are worth that $10, $11, $12 million just as runners, because Chubb, Cook, Henry, all three of these guys, ironically, none of them are great receiving backs. So to add that much value as a runner, you have to have not just that nice foundation as a runner, but the ability to hit those home runs and have that breakaway speed, which Chubb certainly has here. So he gets that big contract. I do think fully worth it, especially in this system. All three of those guys, by the way, in the wide zone Shanahan offense that does lean on the run game, being kind of that foundation and that threat of the outside zone being such a nice benefit to all of the play action that these teams do. So unique value being added by a high-end runner there for Nick Chubb, which is hard to say for a lot of running backs in the NFL. Usually you need to see them contribute at a high level in the receiving game to warrant those big contracts. But with Chubb, I'm cool with it. Then Kareem Hunt is the backup. He's easily the best backup in the NFL. I mean, he's right there in a cluster of guys, like right there around the 10th best running back in the NFL, and he's their backup. And it's nice because he's actually a nice stylistic complement. He's very different to Nick Chubb because Hunt's just so smooth in space. His contact balance, obviously Chubb's got great contact balance too, but his ability in space to shrug guys off, he's a good route runner, he's got really good hands. He is a genuine impact as a receiving back, and I believe they extended him this offseason as well. So they do see these guys as the ultimate 1-2 punch. You're always going to have a top 10 running back on the field in Cleveland, and nobody else can say that, because even the top backs, other than Derrick Henry, who's just a different monster, you're still getting 80% of the carries. There's another 20% of the workload to go to somebody else, and here you're turning it over to another insanely explosive back, though he doesn't have the same speed that Nick Chubb has. Then you got an interesting backup battle here. D'Ernest Johnson looked good in very limited opportunities, obviously behind these two last year. Probably benefited a little bit from the blocking scheme as well. But they draft Demetric Felton, who's very fascinating, and he could either be a running back or a receiver here. He is that true kind of gadget, modern, weapon of sorts. Just a super fluid route runner coming out of UCLA. Maybe the best route running running back that I've ever seen. He played a little bit of both at UCLA, was out there with the receivers in the Senior Bowl, and was just, one of the best receivers at the camp. So, man, he is exciting. I don't know when and how he gets on the field. His best path to playing time might be as a understudy to Jarvis Landry, and eventually maybe becomes their slot receiver. But he's an exciting player to keep an eye on. And then my guy, John Kelly, we've spent enough time on these running backs, but I did like him coming out. Decent comp to Kareem Hunt with that contact balance style. So second for the running back room. There's going to be Browns fans that think this should be the number one running back room in the NFL, and honestly, fine by me if that's the case you want to make. And now we move on to the receiving grade here, and it's kind of in this cluster of just really good receiving cores in the NFL. It comes in 19th. And a lot of that hinges on what this team can get from Odell Beckham. He's going to collect that 87 grade here, and that's really kind of in between the first ballot Hall of Fame elite top 5 Odell Beckham that we saw for the first 4 years of his career and the diminished version that he's been really in Cleveland and his later time in New York. He's battled some injuries, and we may never get that old Odell back. And that's kind of what I'm projecting here. But last year when he was out there, even before the offense really started to click, he was still explosive and a big playmaker for this offense. And I do think kind of getting a nice offseason to recollect, back into normalcy for the most part here, coming off the ACL injury, getting to work in this offense with Baker, a full offseason to really prepare here. That chemistry was just off. Brett Coleman just made an amazing video about it just didn't happen last year with Baker and Odell, but it probably will this year. He's still a great route runner. He's still got the release. He can separate at a high level, and we know he's got amazing hands. He just might not be the same guy that he was years ago where he would catch a slant, break a tackle, and turn it into a 70-yard touchdown. We might not get a whole lot of that insane level explosiveness from Odell, but he can still come in as a top 10 receiver this year and potentially even help them exceed this 19th ranking. But I have really high expectations for Odell Beckham, the number one receiver in these Shanahan offenses, especially when they're a style like this where they're really good route runners and deep threats. They tend to produce at a really high level, and just to throw a little fantasy football talk in there, he's ranked way too low. I think I'm going to end up with a lot of Odell Beckham this year. But then you have Jarvis Landry next to him, the college teammate, best friend duo there. There's reports that he's slimmed down and maybe wants to play a little faster, which would be really nice. The number 2 receiver in these Shanahan offenses, it does require a lot of speed to separate and be that explosive crossing route guy, a guy that can run a post route. That's really always been Jarvis's knock. Is he's a phenomenal slot receiver and one of the best receivers with the ball in his hands at being tough after the catch. And in a more spread style offense, there's tons of room for Jarvis to be a high end playmaker. But in this Shanahan offense, his skill set's a little bit off. So I will say it's possible that this coaching staff came to Jarvis and has been working with him to maybe make him a better scheme fit here in year 2 in the offense, and maybe could be utilized a little more as that middle of the field speedster, a guy that can really run away from those middle level defenders off of play action. And we'll see. It's an exciting prospect because I love Jarvis Landry, and he's just such a high character dude. So it's kind of weird, those are huge names, and we've seen both these guys play a lot of football, but we might not necessarily know exactly what we're going to get from those two stylistically and performance-wise, but they have really good depth behind those two as well. Rashard Higgins is an okay third wide receiver. He's just not a high-end separator against man coverage, but he's got good ball skills. He's got good chemistry with Baker Mayfield. So he's all right, just kind of that possession guy, which is fine for kind of a backup in a lot of ways, because they're going to be in a lot of 12 and even 13 personnel here. So ideally, Higgins isn't on the field a ton. If he has to step in because of injuries, you are going to have some question marks there. But Donovan Peoples-Jones, a year 2 player out of Michigan, a great pick last year, a high upside, former 5-star receiver type of player who just was underutilized at Michigan because of how bad their passing game is, and showed some much better flashes getting better quarterback play in the NFL. He is a high upside player. He could come into that kind of Mike Williams role as a big-bodied possession number 2 receiver with some speed to get open deep as well, and maybe even become more than that. He just has a long ways to go with his route running and consistency and release and all that stuff. You got Kadarrell Hodge, who's kind of a younger version of Rashard Higgins, another guy that just doesn't have high-end speed but good hands and possession ability. So those three kind of in a similar mold, although Peoples-Jones has more just upside and physical traits. And then you've got Anthony Schwartz, who kind of got that track star only tag coming out of Auburn. And there's some truth to that. He doesn't change gears. He is a one-speed player. He's a true vertical option, not a guy that is probably ever going to be a high-end route runner or a true number one receiver or anything like that. But for a guy that was quote-unquote just a track star, it's not like he had bad hands, and he could do some things as far as like hitch routes, and he can run a crossing route, a post, a 9 route. He will probably always have a limited route tree, barring a really surprising development from him, but I don't think he's a typical, just a track star type. He really does have some things as a receiver that can translate in the NFL, especially in an offense like this that is so elite at scheming guys open deep. So look for Schwartz to kind of get sprinkled in throughout the season. I don't expect a big year for him, but I would be very surprised if Kevin Stefanski doesn't have a couple plays, every week or two, just to kind of see what he can do. And he is very exciting for the future. Just the concept of Anthony Schwartz, because he does have legit 4.2 speed. If schemed up appropriately, no corner in the NFL can run stride for stride with him. Then you got Switzer, who's just kind of a journeyman slot guy. JoJo Natson maybe makes the team as a kick returner. We'll monitor that, and then that's probably your wide receiver competition. The tight end group is very deep, as you've got Austin Hooper, who is okay. He's just the absolute definition of a balanced starting caliber tight end. He's a true jack of all trades, master of none, okay blocker, okay separator, okay hands, good size. That's really all there is to say about Austin Hooper. I thought he was a slight overpay, but they had the money to afford it, so it's fine. David Njoku behind him. There's been no development from Njoku. He'll show up every month or two with just incredible games and highlight plays, and his physical traits are exceptional, but the development as a blocker hasn't been what you would hope to see. He is in a contract year, so maybe you get that fire lit under his ass, but just a number 2 tight end who can be a playmaker and get schemed up here and be an asset to this team. But to be honest, the expectations for Njoku just haven't been met here as a former first-round pick, and I do think this is his last year here. Then you have Harrison Bryant, nice find for this team in the 4th round last year. Another just balanced tight end, just another jack of all trades, master of none. He's got a good mentor in Austin Hooper. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if they eventually let Hooper go and Harrison Bryant takes that role as this team's just good starting tight end. He doesn't have high-end traits, but he can be a quality starter in this league for a long time. And that's really all you've got. You've got Carlson and Franks probably going to compete for one last tight end spot there, but a good group of tight ends, even though none of them are elite. And then you got to slide Kareem Hunt in as the RB1 in the receiving game. He is going to see, I believe, the majority of third down work, although it is close to a split, and it's not like Nick Chubb can't do anything in the receiving game. But Kareem Hunt's the guy that's more natural in space. He's more fluid in the screen game and has more of that natural feel of knowing when and where guys are coming from and making that first guy miss, turning upfield. He's a better route runner, has smoother hands, so he is actually one of the better receiving backs in the NFL, and as we mentioned, they use him well. Chubb can break off a screen, though, and go the distance because he does have that speed to do it. And then we mentioned Demetric Felton earlier. Should be a really nice receiving back day one with the route running we saw from him, and maybe they do have some packages designed for him just to throw teams off with the personnel. Like, is he a running back? Is he a receiver? What is he? There's room for Demetric Felton to have some moments this year, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him. So you're getting some nice contributions from the running backs in the receiving game. It's a good group of receivers. Certainly a nice balance of skill set and enough to suffice for this being a really nice offense this year. But it is worth noting that a lot of that is going to hinge on Odell Beckham finally supplanting himself as a true alpha for this team. And now the offensive line that is front and center for this team, quite literally. When you think of the Cleveland Browns offense, it is that O-line, to me at least, that comes to mind first, because you don't have any weak links here, and you have outstanding dare I say, elite potential with everyone on this group. You start at left tackle, Jedrick Wills, great first-round pick last year, was a missing piece for this offense, and in year 2 should continue to develop. He did show some struggles at times in pass protection. I did think he had some footwork issues coming out of Alabama that needed to be worked out, but for the most part, you're talking about an elite athlete, a guy with just vice grips for arms. When he gets his arms on you, especially in the run game, but as a pass protector as well, you're not going anywhere, and he has the athleticism to really refine that footwork and become potentially an elite left tackle. It's just a matter of continuing to see that development from him, which there's almost no reason to think he won't. Then you have Joel Bitonio, who is an elite guard. He is, I would say, probably leading the pack of a tier 2 behind Zach Martin and Quentin Nelson, but totally balanced guy with the toughness and get off as a run blocker and just super polished as a pass protector. No holes in his game. Just maybe not the explosive type of player that you're getting from Martin and Quentin Nelson, but that's pretty nitpicky. J.C. Treader, same deal. Like, he is one of the better centers in the NFL, and just overall balanced game. Great anchor, great technique. Just such a good center to have because he's so smart. Coming out of Cornell, he is literally the president of the Players Association. So this guy, smart on and off the field, physical in the run game. Man, then you have Wyatt Teller next to him, and I'm even lower on Wyatt Teller than some people, but he is certainly trending up. The only reason I would say I'm lower on him is because I would say his ability as a pass protector is probably the weakest link on this offensive line. And even then, it's I'm not that worried about it, but he is just a lot more unproven in traditional pass dropbacks. He totally burst onto the scene, was really one of the breakout players of the entire NFL last year, but he is also maybe their best run blocker. To steal a term from Robert Mays in the Athletic Football Show, they use him as a weapon in the run game. Of course, they run these wide zones, which allow him to get in space so well and climb to the second level and just nail linebackers, but it's not all outside zone. Stefanski has other influences where he has learned under different coaches in Minnesota. So you will see power runs and different ways to get creative with these pulling linemen. And Wyatt Teller on the move is a terrifying force. He probably pulled from a three-point stance to take out that alligator there in that picture. So, he's trending upwards. I'd like to see some more development as a pass protector, but he's a fan favorite. Everyone's super hyped about Wyatt Teller. But there are some holes in his game that he needs to continue to develop, but I trust him to do that. And then you have Jack Conklin at right tackle, who's probably a top 5 right tackle. I still found it interesting that the Titans were willing to let him go because he is just super solid. He's an athletic guy. He's a nasty run blocker, always has. But he re-solidified himself as a pass protector last year for Cleveland and is almost on a budget right tackle contract. And I was surprised that he didn't have a bigger market in free agency than he did. So it is the best offensive line in football, and I don't think there's too much of a debate to be had there. So it's exciting for Cleveland to have that. And they have good depth, too. You've got Chris Hubbard, who's a guy that would start for a lot of offensive lines and has started a lot of games for the Browns at guard and tackle. He is the perfect sixth man off the bench, can play anywhere here. And then you draft Hudson in the 4th round, uber athletic developmental prospect. Maybe down the road you end up with Bitonio at center, and you can, honestly, Hudson's probably eventually going to be a guard here because Wills and Conklin are young. But he's a nice developmental prospect with a lot of athletic upside who doesn't need to see the field this year. You have Drew Forbes, Michael Dunn, guys that have played here. Also keep an eye on Alex Taylor out there at tackle. Again, probably not going to see the field too much, but was another kind of freak athlete, total developmental project. Also with Nick Harris at center, another prospect that I really liked coming out with perfect mobility and scheme fit in this wide zone offense where they like these guys to get up on the move and reach block. And J.C. Treader is, probably not going to be here forever. And Nick Harris, I could totally see eventually sliding right in there at center and just picking right up where they left off. So This all is going to spit out a top 5 offense in the NFL. You get good quarterback play with potential high-end playmaking there as well. The best offensive line in the NFL. A now accomplished and ascending head coach, offensive mind in Kevin Stefanski, ranking 8th for the offensive coaching, paired with a good group of receivers. And, of course, those running backs where they're probably going to have the best run game in the NFL. It's really between like the Patriots and the Ravens. Maybe I'm snubbing someone else, but that's going to spit out the 5th ranked offense. And obviously you have a top 5 offense. It doesn't even matter so much what your defense is. That's going to get you into the playoffs, and then anything can happen. And you're going to be able to really match the best teams in the NFL with that alone. But then we get to this defense, and they have a lot of talent on this side of the ball, too, to be a really good defense. Just maybe a lot more unproven on this side of the ball, but lots of areas that you can look at and get excited about. So let's start with the run defense. It is not a great run defense. Their interior defensive tackles and really linebackers kind of being the issue there. You know, they bring Andrew Billings back from the opt-out last year. He's a good run-defending nose tackle, but nothing truly special. And then next to him, I would be worried about these guys' ability to hold their gaps and not get pushed around. You got Jordan Elliott, who there's a lot of hype for him. A lot of people thought this was a great pick. I thought he was a fine prospect. Not the strongest player, not the most technically sound. Yeah, he's quick, but I did think he has a long way to go, and he might be seeing significant playing time here because they seem to really like him. So that's an area that I look at, especially on that interior there, where I'm like, yeah, that's kind of a weak point in the defense. But they have other bodies as well that might be able to step up. You know, Malik Jackson at this stage, he's probably just a pass rushing specialist. But Tommy Togiai, a very nice pick. I liked him as a pick a lot more than Jordan Elliott. A unique player. He's 6'2", 300 pounds, quote-unquote undersized, but he is incredibly strong and has that core balance that you look for. He also has a nice first step to generate some power as a rusher as well. Really won't be surprised if Togiai beats out Jordan Elliott because I think he's a better player, but we'll just have to wait and see on that front. You got Sheldon Day, who's a veteran, who can get in as a part of a rotation here and be okay, but just not anything you're excited about. Same thing with Damian Square, who's also pretty undersized, but has actually played pretty good run defense and a rotational role for the Chargers. So you do have some veteran options if guys like Togiai and Elliott really struggle. And then, of course, Marvin Wilson is another guy that people are extremely excited about. Most people I see think Marvin Wilson was the biggest steal in all of undrafted free agency, and I disagree. I think he was certainly a steal and should have been drafted, but I had him as defensive tackle 14 as a 4th to 5th round grade. To see him go undrafted after the year he had last year, not a huge surprise for me, certainly a surprise, but I think he makes the team. I think he competes and tries to fight his way up the depth chart, but to expect much from him in his rookie season, I don't know. I won't be surprised if he does it, but I just think there's a little bit too much hype on him. He's a good defensive tackle prospect, virtually no ability as a pass rusher. He just got absolutely demolished at the Senior Bowl. Not a lot of quickness, and yeah, I was just saying tamper expectations for Marvin Wilson a little bit. Good pickup, but he's still an undrafted free agent for a reason. And then Malik McDowell. Look, if you want to get excited about Malik McDowell making a comeback, that's your prerogative. He's not making this team. I'll just say that right now. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but I will be stunned. I'll just leave it at that. But then we go to the edge, and it is elite out there on the edge. You've got Myles Garrett, who, for whatever reason, actually hasn't graded out very well per PFF against the run. He's been like low 70s, high 60s over the last 2 years. So I don't know if it's a down-to-down consistency thing there or whatever, maybe saving a little juice for the pass rush downs. But you watch him play. If Myles Garrett wants to stop the run, there's really nothing your tight end or tackle can do to stop him. So I'll just say that. Maybe the down-to-down effort and consistency not always there, or at least it's not reflected in his PFF grading profile. But I have zero questions about Myles Garrett and his ability to play the run, especially on critical downs when he wants to. Then you have Jadeveon Clowney on the opposite, who's always been a premium run-defending edge guy. It's just been the lack of development as a pass rusher that's been a little bit frustrating for teams throughout his career, because this is now his 4th team in as many years. But as a run defender, there's no doubt that this guy has the traits and ability to play with that discipline. So if nothing else, they are going to make it very difficult for teams to get to the corner with those two freaks on the edge, really. So I don't even know if I mentioned, they rank 23rd for run defense, by the way. But they also have Porter Gustin, who's a really high-effort, nice guy to rotate in there and keep Garrett and Clowney fresh, and even Talk McKinley there, who I think plays purely a pass rush specialist role. Jackson and Malveaux have some size. And Curtis Weaver, just another amazing move, little subtle move, but Andrew Berry stealing him from the Dolphins after he was going to end up, I believe, got an injury waiver last year, and apparently there's an unwritten rule that you're not supposed to pick those guys up, and you let the teams, have them clear waivers, and then they can put them on the practice squad or on IR. And the Browns said, screw that unwritten rule. We want Curtis Weaver. We'll take him from you, Miami. So they bring him in here. Hopefully he's healthy. He was a good prospect, definitely a guy that I thought belonged in day 2 of that draft, and a nice scheme fit here, as well as a bigger body defensive end. An interesting prospect for sure. So it's a deep edge group for sure. And then with the linebackers, they're trying to get more from this group. We'll see if these moves work out for them. They're going from B.J. Goodson to Anthony Walker, and we don't even know who the full-time starters are here. I just look at this group, and it's really Anthony Walker or Jacob Phillips for that Mike role. And to me, Jacob Phillips just isn't ready to go. I imagine that's why they went for an Anthony Walker, who started 3,000 snaps for the Colts over his career. So he's not a great player, but he has the experience. Sione Takitaki is a unique linebacker in this scheme. He plays kind of that overhang base down linebacker here. Really patrols outside the tackles, takes on tight ends, slot receivers, has some good sideline to sideline speed. And in those scenarios, he's a really nice, secure tackler, will blow up those blocks on the edge. But again, not much of a guy of in between the tackles, or at least he hasn't to this point. I won't be the least bit surprised, however, if they ask him to be more of that middle linebacker here, if they don't like what they see from Anthony Walker, and then you can plug in like Malcolm Smith or Phillips or Wilson or even Fields as the other outside linebacker here, or even you talk about a Ronnie Harrison, who's their strong safety, potentially filling in some of that role as well. But you have Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who's also kind of a half safety, half linebacker here. I think a true weak side will type of player, not a thumper at all. When he gets blocked, it's rough. It's hard to watch. He gets bullied inside the tackles, and that's not what you want him to do. I always said that. At a time, my high-end comp for him was Jamal Adams, who's a safety. So he's a unique player coming out, half linebacker, half safety. If you're asking him to thump between the tackles and be a high-end run defender, you're not using JOK correctly. He is much more of a coverage oriented linebacker, where you get him in man coverage, match coverage, cover the flats, man up on tight ends. He can do a lot of stuff. Defending the run between the tackles is not one of those things. So the run defense ranks 23rd. That's probably not going to be the worst in the league, but I do think good run teams are going to be able to kind of have their way, especially up the middle with this team. They do contain the sidelines really well, though, with Takitaki, JOK, Garrett, Clowney. The edge run defense is uniquely built here, but squishy up the middle. And now the pass rush. They do come inside the top 10 here. For me, Myles Garrett and Khalil Mack kind of one's ascending, one's descending. Hard to say who's the number one edge guy in my mind heading into next year, but I would bet Myles Garrett finishes the year as that dude. So he's a premium alpha guy. I would say almost the favorite for Defensive Player of the Year because of voter fatigue with Aaron Donald. So we'll keep an eye on that. I mean, he alone is going to get you close to a top 10 pass rush because he's just that good. And that's really kind of shown through here. They don't have a lot of other guys here that get you that excited. Jadeveon Clowney's much more of a name at this point, but he is a good number 2. This is the correct role for him. Name value, this looks like some unbelievable duo and should be the best pass rush in the NFL. And I'm sure there's people out there that are going to have probably too high expectations for Jadeveon Clowney this year. But just, he hasn't been an exceptional pass rusher for 3 or 4 years, and even in that one high-end season he had for Houston, he was being used very uniquely inside that scheme. So depending on what your expectations are for Jadeveon Clowney, maybe pump the brakes a little bit. But if your expectations are a good 45-50 pressure season, 8 to 10 sacks, a good, numbers of a good number 2 pass rusher, that is fair for Jadeveon Clowney. And as I said, it was a great addition, and he's going to help things out for sure. But then inside, I like the Malik Jackson signing. He is a true pass rushing specialist at this point, but he's going to be allowed to play that role here. He's still a guy with get off and some quickness as far as putting together some different pass rush moves and mix things up so he's not just leaning on power. But as your best interior rusher, you're also counting on him to stay healthy, which has been tough for him. It's not ideal, but it's good. It's the guys next to him that I worry about. Jordan Elliott probably going to start the season as their number 2 interior rusher. And I'm not a Jordan Elliott guy. I just have never really seen it. He's had some flashes for sure, but the consistency, there's not a whole lot of power there. The athletic traits are just okay. His technique as a finesse rusher is, he can get creative, but it's just not consistent. So I don't know. Maybe he proves me wrong. You got Andrew Billings, as we continue to look at the interior defensive line depth here, is a pocket pusher in some ways, but just not a high-end pass rusher. Tommy Togiai, same thing that we said about Elliott and Togiai with the run defense. I think he's just a higher upside player, and I would love to see him beat out Jordan Elliott. I think he has a great mentor there in Malik Jackson, who's a very similar build. Both guys, really nice first steps. So Togiai is the guy I'd get excited about for the future. Just don't know how much we'll see from him this year. Day and Square are fine veterans, but you don't want them on the field. Marvin Wilson, no pass rushing ability at all. He's a true run defender in there. And then the edge depth, it's going to be mostly Garrett and Clowney as long as they're healthy. But Talk McKinley was a nice signing. They got Claiborne in there for some good pass rush reps last year, and I do expect that McKinley is a part of a rotation here, and he's got some traits. He can get after the quarterback. For a third rusher, McKinley is really good. It's just, he was a first-round bust and not a guy with consistency to be a full-time starter, but for a cheap, easy pickup there, maybe rekindle the fire and get some more development from him here in Cleveland too. Just a good move to add him as depth. Porter Gustin, more of an early down, high-effort run defender. Joe Jackson, Malvo, not expecting much there. And then Curtis Weaver, again, I got to keep an eye on. He's got to make the team first, but was a guy with some underrated craftiness as a pass rusher at Boise State. And if he's healthy, he really should make this team because he's got some upside there. Then the linebackers, they rank 24th. It's really an unproven, mysterious group. The conversation for me starts with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who you hope and expect is the full-time kind of 3-down linebacker here. And again, being more of that weak side linebacker when they do go base. But his coverage abilities, his instincts in space, just the playmaking, it's exciting. And I wasn't quite as high as JOK is saying like he's a lock top 20 pick or anything like that. He was almost always mocked inside the top 20. I did think, though, that he was a first-round talent. So to get him in the second round really was one of the steals of the draft. And he is someone that adds a ton of upside to this linebacking core that just hasn't really had it, to be completely honest. So he's the one guy that can say with confidence, and even then he's a rookie, but I do think he's out there as the full 3-down linebacker for them. But then after JOK, I mentioned it's kind of a mystery. It does seem Anthony Walker is the guy that's going to have the green dot. He's going to be the middle linebacker, and that means he's going to be on the field. You don't take the guy with the green dot off the field on third downs. So even if I think Taki is a better player than Anthony Walker. I think Malcolm Smith is a better player than Anthony Walker. It does seem that he's the guy they want out there, and he's not a bad player. He's just okay. Like, he's a decent athlete, he's a smart player, just not the best tackler, not the most aggressive run defender, not the highest IQ cover player. He's just okay. Taki is a unique athlete out there who, like I mentioned, has played more of that overhang base linebacker. That's going to get sticky with JOK in there because I think JOK can just play that at a higher level. And then you have Malcolm Smith, good veteran, but as long as JOK is working out, Malcolm Smith, more of a cover-minded player, probably not going to see a lot of Malcolm Smith out there. Same thing with Jacob Phillips. I'm not a huge Jacob Phillips fan, but he did get a lot of reps for them last year. I think he challenges Anthony Walker for that middle linebacker spot. I just don't expect him to win it. And then you even have Mack Wilson, who's made like 3 or 4 really nice splashy coverage plays, and then other than that, he's been terrible in both run defense and coverage. So they do seem to be actively trying to replace Mack Wilson, even though a lot of Browns fans have high expectations for him. And then you got Tony Fields, nice 5th-round draft pick, but more safety than linebacker. He was kind of a poor man's JOK as a prospect. And then Lee there is a journeyman veteran. So a lot of bodies. It's one of the deeper linebacker groups in the NFL. It's just difficult to know like who's going to just take the bull by the horns, or if that's going to happen. I would say this is the worst position group on this team, but you have one really exciting prospect in JOK that you hope shows up sooner rather than later. And now the secondary. Oh, I've been waiting to talk about this secondary. I think this is the most fun secondary in the entire NFL. They rank 6th, and that's projecting some, but I have super high expectations for this group. I think Denzel Ward can be the guy this year that emerges as like the best corner in the NFL. It's just such a high variance position that, we saw Gilmore do it 2 years ago. It was Jair Alexander last year. Denzel Ward could be that dude this year with a better pass rush and better secondary around him. We haven't seen that full season of elite play from him, but his tape is so good. He's really just high-end athletic type of dude, and just more time to develop, more time to understand route combinations, another year understanding this cover 4 heavy system. Denzel Ward, I think, could be that dude this year. I'm excited to watch him. They draft Greg Newsome in the 1st round. One thing that you need to note here is this secondary and this defense, they have a strong understanding of what they want to do, and that is run about as much cover 4 as anybody in the league. And Greg Newsome ran about as much cover 4 as any prospect coming out. A guy with elite short area burst and a high IQ in those off-zone quarters coverages, which makes him the perfect corner to come in here and start as a rookie in this quarters heavy system. He's not the best press player, and he's not going to have to do that in a quarters heavy system. So I think the sky's the limit for Greg Newsome. To have him next to Denzel Ward has potential to be one of the best, if not the best, cornerback duos in the NFL. But of course, he's a rookie and has to come out and show it. Troy Hill, coming directly from the Rams defense that ran the cover 4 system from Vic Fangio and Brandon Staley. Yep, plug him right in there as the slot corner. Excellent signing, great value for a high-end starting corner. He can step outside as well if need be, but he's going to be the slot. And then you have Greedy Williams, just because why not have Greedy Williams as your 4th corner, who I thought was the best corner in his draft class 2 years ago. Elite speed, more of a man cover guy, but hey, if he's your 4th corner and more of a matchup guy, that could be a great role for Greedy Williams, and certainly above his pay grade, a guy that missed last season with injury. So you're 4 deep of guys that are more than good. It's just a matter of Greg Newsome and Greedy kind of proving it, but I have full confidence in those guys to do so. The depth is poor. These guys got to stay healthy. MJ Stewart's just not a high-end player. Jackson's been on the field for them, and it hasn't been pretty. You got some lengthy prospects in Allen and Green, and that's really it. So it's a thin group of corners like past the top 4, but the top 4 is one of the best groups of 4 in the league. And then the safety group is also outstanding. They signed John Johnson, just such a stable force, one of the smarter safeties in the league. He's a guy that communicates at a super high level. And again, coming from that Brandon Staley cover 4 defense, they're going to resume what they did last year, where they, I think, were second in the NFL in highest percentage of quarters coverages. And now you get John Johnson, who, the reason he's such a great fit for this scheme is, his weakness is long speed. He's not a traditional, free safety Earl Thomas role type of dude. But in a quarters defense where his quick agility and high IQ and ability to communicate and pass off routes in those match quarters coverages, that's what he does at such a high level. And it's a scheme that's complicated. Like, cover 3 is cover 3. You've got the high third, high middle third. Cover 2 is cover 2, right? You've got your half of the field. Cover 4 is a freaking mess, man. You are communicating, you're passing off receivers. You have to know when to gamble, you have to know when to stay put. It is a heady coverage to run. And they have some other talent there at safety, but to get a kind of captain of the defense type, a guy that just doesn't make mistakes in those coverages, it's extremely valuable. So that's what John Johnson's going to bring to the table here, just raising the floor so high. And then Grant Delpit next to him. I don't think I realized this when he was coming out about how great he could be in a cover 4 system. Maybe I just didn't have as good of an understanding of what it takes to be a cover 4 safety, and we've certainly seen an emergence of cover 4 around the league since Grant Delpit got drafted. But thinking back on it, I loved Grant Delpit as a prospect. I thought he was a steal. I couldn't believe he wasn't a first-round pick. But when he went like single high free safety, I didn't love what I saw. I actually really liked him down in the box, playing a lot of man coverage. But cover 4 is like the perfect hybrid of those two things, to the point where he doesn't have to be all the time that single high free safety, but his ability to flip his hips and just cover guys man-to-man from the slot was exceptional for a college prospect. And getting healthy this year, his ceiling is extraordinary. I mean, you're adding really 2 first-round picks that weren't available to this team last year, in my opinion, with Greedy and Grant Delpit to this secondary. And you're actually adding 3 because Greg Newsome was literally a first-round pick this year. So that's obviously very exciting. And these are all players that I really liked coming out. Grant Delpit, Greg Newsome, Greedy, Denzel. So sky's the limit for this team. They can certainly be the best secondary in the NFL if all these guys hit. Then you've got Ronnie Harrison, the Rams, and there's clear LA Rams influences with this secondary and the types of schemes they want to run. So with Ronnie Harrison, you're looking at that third safety role. With the Rams, they ran as much 3 safety as anybody, and he's going to help the linebacking group as well. He's just kind of that box third safety. Hopefully you get Delpit back to take the true kind of quarters high safety, and then you bring down Harrison in those dime packages. Redwine and LeCounte, good rangy prospects. I like both those players. Good backups, to say the least. Both have upside in their own right, and that's probably your safety group, is those 5. Maybe Minder makes the team, but probably not. So really fun secondary, to say the least, and they know what they want to do here. They want to run that quarters coverage, which it's growing around the league because it's a system that can handle these Shanahan offenses, frankly, really well, because of the way they can rotate the safeties and pick up those crossing routes is really what it comes down to. And they're going to have a lot of practice against that scheme as well. So they're a very modern, forward-thinking organization these days, the Browns, and I don't think it's a coincidence that they are adapting what that Rams secondary did so well last year. So the defense as a whole comes out tied for 11th. They have a chance to get into the top 10, but frankly, their offense could be so good and take care of the ball so much and control the clock that just to have an above-average defense is going to be more than fine for them. But with a top 10 pass rush and a secondary that, if everything clicks, could be an elite secondary, this could also be a borderline elite defense. And then JOK at linebacker, like so much upside on this defense. Just a lot of unproven moving pieces at the same time. The defensive coaching as well. I don't think the staff has been remarkable. They clearly have a good plan here, and I think that it could shape out that 23 ends up too low. But just a lot to prove for the defense that wasn't great last year. The home field is right down there in the middle. Browns fans deserve a lot of credit for their loyalty, and they can get that stadium rocking. So they're right down there in the middle at 14th. And then we've mentioned it's a 4-3 front quarters coverage defense, inspired by what they saw from Brandon Staley last year, to say the least. The special teams is right in the middle, tied for 17th. Their kicker situation with Cody Parkey, not necessarily ideal, but they have really good coverage units for the kick coverage units with all of the depth and talent they have on this team, and a good return man, potentially, and Anthony Schwartz coming in. And then the culture, ranking 15th. The Browns are building something special here, and if you asked me 2 years ago if I could see the Browns having a top half culture in 2 years, I would have said hell no. But here they are, earning the benefit of the doubt and building something really special here, ranking 15th. One last look at the strengths and weaknesses for this team. The scheme and offensive coaching is a genuine strength for this team. Kevin Stefanski and this Shanahan wide zone offense, they mesh everything so well in the run game. So you like what you got there, paired with the best combination of offensive line running backs. They have the best O-line in the second running back room. Man, that's an asset, obviously. Then on defense, Myles Garrett alone is a strength. He's one of those ultra superstars that changes the numbers, just forces offensive coordinators to adjust their game plan and account for that specific player. And that just helps the defense build off of that and get everyone else to step up. And then a talented secondary, for sure, and a secondary that I'm very optimistic about, with the potential to actually be the best secondary in the entire NFL. Weaknesses for this team? Not a whole lot, just kind of unproven in a lot of spots. Quarterback, we'll see if that can ascend to a high level. The receivers, there's some unproven aspects of that. Can Odell get back? And then on defense especially, the linebackers and the secondary, there's just some spots that we're optimistic about, but there's always going to be room when you have that many question marks for some of that stuff not to work out, even though I kind of feel like it all is, because things are just trending upwards so fast here for the Cleveland Browns. And that brings us to the schedule, and their Vegas over-under is as high as we've seen so far with 10.5 wins. It's a third-place schedule for the Browns. They did win 11 games last year, but that was third in their division, so that's a benefit to them. I have them going over at 12-5 on the season. We've run on pretty long here, so I'm not going to go game by game there, but I'm very optimistic for the Browns this season. Some people might even have them higher, and honestly, that's okay. I do have Super Bowl futures on the Browns as well. I think I got them at like 25-1 earlier on in the offseason. I can imagine that's climbed since then. But this is definitely a team with the talent that they have, could be making a case for having the best roster in the NFL. And just as we saw with the Bucs last year, that can get you a Super Bowl, even if you don't have the best quarterback in the NFL. So that is going to do it for the Browns deep dive. Let me know in the comments down below what you think. Too high, too low for this team. Also, please do hit that like button if you enjoyed. Really helps me out. And subscribe. Check out the rest of my deep dives as well. As you're watching this, I am actively going to be out of town, so probably going to be a good 4 or 5 days until the next deep dive, and then we'll really hit the ground running, wrapping up the series as we lead up to the start of the NFL season. Just around the corner, baby. But until then, thank you for watching, and we'll see you for the next one.